Hi, it's Jen from Teal and Finch. Today we're making this fun summer top. I'll tell you more about it and then we'll get started. Alright, so to construct this top we will make two rectangles. The front will be slightly shorter than the back. And once we've made the two rectangles, we will seam the shoulders together, and I'll show you how to sew those together. And we will also seam the side. So we'll leave an opening for the armhole and we'll sew together each side and leave a little slit at the bottom as well, just for style. Alright, so that's the way it will go. Alright, so for this pattern today I am using Yarn Inspirations Karen Cakes, and you will need a 4.5 millimeter and a 5 millimeter crochet hook, your scissors, tapestry needle. I'm going to show you how I keep track of my rows using these stitch markers here. If you don't have stitch markers, you could use a paper clip or yarn scraps. I'm also using a ruler just to help me with my pattern. I'll show you how I use it. Just to not lose my place. And then maybe a pencil. Just wanted to show you how I minimize mistakes, and maybe you'll get some few tips in the pattern in the video on how to read patterns and follow along, just so that it's very easy to get lost sometimes in patterns. I'll show you what I do even on my own patterns to make sure I don't get lost. Alright, so okay, so before we get started, first we're going to make a gauge swatch, and so you'll need a ruler for this. And this is a really important step not to skip, because if you do, your sweater might come out way too big or too small. And so especially with this smaller size yarn and hook, I find that crocheters really have different gauges and tensions when they crochet, and we did have some differences among the testers of which size hook people ended up using. So I just wanted to go over this first with you. So I am starting with my 4.5 millimeter hook for the chain, and then I'm using my H or 5 millimeter for the rest. Okay, so starting with the 4.5 millimeter, first we're going to chain. Okay, so I'm going to tie a slip knot on my hook and chain 20. Okay, so I've chained 20. I'm going to put that down and get my H hook, 5 millimeter, and single crochet in the fourth chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the fourth chain. And then chain 1, skip 1, and single crochet in the next chain. And then chain 1, skip 1, and chain 1, skip 1, and we're going to do that the whole way across. Whoop, there you go. And our last single crochet will go in the last chain. And so we will have 18 stitches in this row. And so each single crochet and chain counts as a stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And then this little chain at the end of the row counts as a stitch right there. Okay, so then Okay, for row 2, we're going to chain 2 and turn, and we skip the first single crochet there, and we're going to go in the chain space. So not in the chain itself, but just in that space, and single crochet in that chain space. And chain 1, and we're going to skip the single crochet and go in the space again. And just do that the whole way across. Okay, and then we, at the end of the row, there's this chain 2. We're just going to go in the space. Oh. Yeah. Single crochet right there in that chain 2 space at the end of the row. Okay, so we should still have 18. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, so we just repeat row 2. Chain 2 and turn, and just single crochet in the space, chain 1, and we just keep on going with that. All right, so this should go for a total of 16 rows, and then we'll have our 4" by 4" gauge swatch. So just keep doing that, and chain 2 and turn, and then we'll counting the first row. So we've done 3 so far. You can see there's the first row, second row, third row. I just count the single crochets there. And so we know we've done 3 rows. When we get to 16, we should have a 4 by 4" swatch. Okay, so just to give you a little preview, for me that's measuring exactly 4 inches right there. So let's pull that down a little, even just measure it this way, you could see. But we just want to make sure, because sometimes as you go, things stretch. I especially find as I crochet faster, as I get used to the pattern and as the piece gets bigger and easier to hold on to, sometimes my gauge gets bigger. And so I really have to watch that. So at least do this until the length is 2 inches. And we want to try to go to 4. But in this pattern, what you can also do, the height is not as critical because you can always just add more rows to your pattern. And so if the pattern, you know, says to a certain number of rows, but you want it longer, you could always just keep going. Or if you want it shorter, of course, you could stop sooner. So the height is not as critical. What's really important is the width. So if yours is, you know, really big, like you're holding it up and it's like 5 inches or even 4.5, that means for every 4 inches of your pattern, you're going to have an extra ½ inch or an extra inch. And so it's going to make it really big. But if it's too small, like say you only have 3.5 inches, it's going to be ½ inch too small for every 4 inches. So that really adds up over time. If it's, you know, 1/4 of an inch off and you can't get any closer with a different size hook, then don't worry about it. I mean, you get as close as you can. So just be mindful of that as you're going and choosing your size. Okay, so I hope that helps with your gauge swatch. Go ahead and if it's too big, use a smaller hook. If it's too small, use a bigger hook. All right, and you can let me know if you have any questions in the comments as well, and I'll try to help you. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start off with our chain using the 4.5mm hook, and we're going to chain 112. This is for the size medium. And there are other sizes on my blog, in the written pattern on my blog. We'll have women's regular sizes and plus sizes. So we're just going to make a slip knot on the hook and just start chaining. And I just found with this particular stitch pattern, it's helpful. We're only using the 4.5 millimeter hook for this one step. Some patterns, just depending on the stitches, it's helpful to use a smaller hook. So for the rest of the pattern, we'll use the 5.0 millimeter hook. So we're chaining 112. Okay, so I have 112 stitches, and just since it's such a long chain, what I did was I put a stitch marker every 30 stitches, just so as I went, I didn't have to count for such a long time. And then I went back and checked and counted, make sure that, you know, I had the right number, because if you're off by one stitch, then the next row your stitch count is going to be wrong. So it really is worth taking the time to double check and make sure you did the right number of stitches. And that's my little way that I do that. And so then on here, I'm just using my ruler. So I'm checking off, I chained 112. Now I'm switching to the 5 millimeter hook, and I'm going to start row 1. So I'm just putting my ruler there so that I keep track of where I am. Okay, so we have the 5 millimeter hook now. And we are going to single crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully you can see that okay. In the 4th chain from the hook. Okay. And now and throughout the pattern, this is going to count as one stitch. It's a little hard to see, but so I'm going to put a stitch marker in there. There's 3 chain stitches in there, just to remind me that this will be the last place I will stitch at the end of the next row, and you'll see when we come to that. Okay, then we're going to chain 1. We're going to skip 1 chain and go into the next chain. And we're going to single crochet, chain 1, and then skip a chain and then go into the next chain. Chain 1 and then skip a chain and go into the next. So we're going to do that the whole way across. And we get to the end of the row, we should have a single crochet in that last chain stitch. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of this row, and I'm going to chain 1, skip 1, and then single crochet in that last chain stitch. And then we'll have, when we count all the single crochets and the chains, we'll have 110 stitches. Okay, so on my pattern, I just check off row 1 and move my ruler down to row 2. Okay. So we chain 2 and turn. And we're going to single crochet in the first chain 1 space. Okay, so we're skipping the first single crochet that's right here. We're going to go in this space right there. And then what we can also do is put a stitch marker. Our last stitch in the next row will go in this chain 2 space right here. So you can put your stitch marker right there in the chain 2 space, and so that way you'll remember where your last stitch will go. Okay, chain 1, skip the single crochet and go into the chain 1 space. Chain 1, go into the next chain 1 space. And we're just going to keep doing that the whole way across. So we're going in the space, we're not going in the stitch. So coming to the end of the row, we'll chain 1, and then our last single crochet will be in this chain 2 space at the end of the row. So right where we put that stitch marker in the beginning. So single crochet, and then we can take that out. Okay, so that's the end of row 2, and we're moving on to row 3. Okay, so for row 3, we're going to chain 2, single crochet in the chain 1 space, and again, if you want, you can put a stitch marker in that chain 2 space. Yep. It's easier to find with your hook than with the stitch marker, but once you get the hang of it, if you've never done it before, it'll be easier. But this will help keep the sides of your project straight. Okay, now we're going to chain 1, skip 1, and single crochet in the next chain 1 space. Okay, so we have 2 single crochets, and then what's new for this row is we're going to chain 3, and then we're going to skip 3 stitches. So skip the single crochet, the chain 1, the single crochet, and go in the next chain 1 space, single crochet there. So we've made this little hole, chain 3, skip 3, and then we're going to do our chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. We're going to do that 8 times. And sometimes, just to show you, I'm going to put a stitch marker there, right where the repeat starts. Yep. So there's our chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. We're going to do that 8 times. Okay, so we can count. We have, from the stitch marker where we started, we have 8 single crochets. So it'll also be 8 chains. Okay, so then we will chain 3, skip 3 again. Go in that chain 1 space and single crochet. All right, so we can take this out, and we're going to start that again. So chain 1, skip 1. You can put your stitch marker there. Okay, and the same thing where we chain 1, single crochet 8 times. Okay, so there we have 8, and then we're going to chain 3 again, and then we will skip 3, okay, so this is our repeat right here, the 8 single crochets with the chain 1s in between, and then the chain 3, skip 3. So we're going to keep doing that all the way across. 4. And then our 5th one, we end here. Nope, it's coming out. Hold on. Okay, single crochet to end that 5th repeat. And then we chain 1, skip 1, and single crochet in the chain 2 space at the end of the row. Okay. So in the larger sizes, we'll just be increasing, instead of 5 repeats, it'll be 6 or 7, or maybe it'll just be 4 for a smaller size. Okay, so this row is the most fiddly because you're kind of establishing the pattern. The future rows will be a little bit easier. Okay, so now we will chain 2 and turn, and now we're ready for row 4. So we're moving down to row 4 here. Okay, so to start row 4, we will single crochet in the first chain 1 space, and now we're going to chain 5. So we're going to skip that single crochet, chain 5, skip 5 stitches. So skip the single crochet, the 3 chains, and then the next single crochet. We're going to go in the next chain 1 space. So on this row, you don't really even have to count. All you're doing is following what's in the previous row. So we're just chain 1, single crochet in the space, until we Okay, we can take these out. Okay, until we reach the next single crochet before the chain 3, and then we chain 5. And we skip all those and go in the next chain 1 space. And you just keep doing that the whole way across. Yep. All right, so coming to the end of row 4, I'm on my last chain 5. We're going to single crochet, and then chain 1 and single crochet in the chain 2 space at the end of that row. Okay, so we're moving on to row 5. Okay, so this one is very similar to the last one, only we're going to chain 7 instead of 5. So chain 2 and turn. There's our first single crochet, and now we're going to chain 7. And skip 7. So skip the first single crochet and then the 5 and then the next single crochet, go in the chain 1 space. And then again, just follow along with the previous row. Okay, so here we are to the next chain 7. Skip 7, and then just a little tip is to try to keep that tight right here. It's easy when you go across to kind of let it, get kind of big, and then you'll have a awkward space. So just pull that tight, keep it tight as you go, and then just keep going the whole way across. Okay, so coming to the end of row 5, our last chain 7, Okay, and that last single crochet goes in the chain 2 space at the end of the row. Okay, so that is the end of row 5. Okay, so row 6, we chain 2 and turn. So now we're going to move towards closing up our chains. So our first thing we're going to do is on this row that we're going to have somewhere we're working in the actual chain stitch. So the first thing we're going to do is single crochet in that chain that starts this big opening here. So we're going to go actually in the chain right there. Okay, so single crochet there, chain 5, and then single crochet in that last chain. So skip 5 and single crochet in the last chain. Okay, so we had 7 chains. We're single crocheting in the first and the last with 5 chains in between. So chain 1 and skip 1, and we just follow along here, and then I'll show you how to do it again on the next opening. So just to be clear, you know, in the pattern it will say single crochet in the chain 1 space, which is what we're doing here, versus single crocheting in the chain stitch, which is this. So here's the first chain. We're actually going in the stitch, not in the space. So and it is easier to go in the top of the chain here. So if you want to do that, that's fine. I just noticed that it pulls and kind of makes a larger opening. So that might work itself out as you go and not end up being much of a problem. Or if you're not a fan of that, there are 2 loops that you could go under. So I like to go under both the loops in the chain. So just, I think that's just more of a personal preference. But I do just find that that keeps things tighter, and maybe a little bit neater. But do what works for you. Okay, and so we just continue with that all the way across. Okay, so here we are at the end of row 6, and I'm doing my last chain 5, single crochet in that last stitch, and then chain 1 and single crochet in the chain 2 space at the end of that row. And chain 2, and now we'll start row 7. Okay, so this will be our last row for this little grouping here. So we single crochet in the chain 1 space, chain 1, and so now we're going to be closing this up. So we're going to chain 1, single crochet in that first chain, chain 1, skip 1 chain, single crochet in the next chain, chain 1, skip a chain and single crochet in the next, this is the last one, and chain 1, and then we just match the previous row until we get to the next one. Okay, and then I'll show you that again. So skip the single crochet, go in the first chain stitch, chain 1, skip a chain, go in the next chain stitch, skip one, go in the next chain stitch, chain one, and now we're back to our chain one, skip one, single crochets. Okay, so we essentially you're doing 3 single crochets in those 5 chains, skipping one in between, so we have an even, so we've basically closed up the opening there. So now I'll keep going across. So coming to the end of row 7, I will do this last part here. Chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. Okay, so then our last single crochet will go in the chain 2 space at the end of the row. Okay, so that is okay. Part 2 of this sweater pattern here. We are on row 8. We are going to chain 2 and turn. So this row is very much like row 2 from before. We are just chain 2, single crochet in the chain 1 space, chain 1, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, and we just do that the whole way across. So coming into the end of that row, we will single crochet in the chain 2 space, okay. So now we are on to row 9, and we're going to start repeating the same thing we did before, but we're going to stagger it. So we'll start our chain 3 in the middle here and here. So chain 2, turn, single crochet in the first chain 1 space. All right, and now we're going to do a repeat 6 times. So chain 1, single crochet, and I will put, just to help me with counting, a stitch marker right in that chain 1. That's the beginning of the repeat. Chain 1, so that's 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 single crochets, and now we chain 3, skip 3, single crochet in the next chain 1 space. Okay, so now we can take that one out. That was just our preliminary. Now we're going to start the repeats across. So we will chain 1, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, and that's the beginning of our first repeat. All right, so we're going to do that 8 times. So that was 1, so 4, okay, so 8 times we chained 1 single crochet. Now we chain 3, skip 3, and single crochet in the last, or the next chain 1 space. So that's the end of our first repeat. So we are going to do that again and the whole way across. So chain 1, single crochet, and we can mark the first, just so we make sure we don't lose track. and then it reduces counting. Okay, so just chain 1, single crochet 8 times. Okay, so that was 8. Then we chain 3 and skip 3 and single crochet. And you can kind of see that's kind of in the right place. It's going to be staggered. There's the other one. It will be staggered between the previous ones. Okay, so just keep going with that repeat. Okay, so we repeated we repeated 3 times. So here was the first one, 2, 3, 4. Once you finish the 4th one, you will chain 1, single crochet to the end of the row, and the last single crochet will go in the chain 2 space at the end of the row, just like we have been doing. Okay, so that's row 9. All right, chain 2, and we'll move on to row 10. We turn. So we single crochet in the first chain 1 space, and just like before, this row is pretty simple because there's really no need to count. You just follow what was in the previous row, only this time we'll chain 5 instead of chaining 3. Okay, so we come to this single crochet. We're going to skip that, chain 5, skip all the chains, skip the next single crochet, and single crochet in that chain 1 space, and then keep going with that all the way across. Okay, so coming to the end of row 10, we will single crochet in the end of that chain 2 and turn. And now again we are back to our chain 7. So single crochet in the chain 1 space, and we'll just follow the stitches until we get to that chain 5. Okay, so we're 1 single crochet before the chain 5, chain 7, and single crochet in that chain 1 space. We skipped the single crochets in the chain 5, and just keep going with that the whole way across. Okay, coming to the end of that row, you'll have a bunch of single crochets, chain 1s, and our last one will be single crochet in the chain 2 space. Okay, row 12, chain 2, turn. We're going to single crochet, chain 1 until we get to the chain 7. All right, and we'll do the same thing here that we did before. Single crochet in that, gets a little tight, in that first chain. Now we chain 5, single crochet in the last chain. Try to keep that tight there, and then just keep going to the next one. So single crochet in that first chain, chain 5, and the last chain. Okay, so just keep going the whole way across. So coming to the end of row 12, we'll single crochet in the chain 2 space, and then chain 2, then turn. Okay, now for the last row of our pattern repeat, single crochet in the chain 1 space. So yeah, no need to count here, we're just following what's there, and it will be the same pattern as before, only we have this group of single crochets a little bit more. Okay, so chain 1, single crochet in the first chain, chain 1, skip 1, single crochet in the next chain, chain 1, skip 1, single crochet in the last chain there. Okay. And then just chain 1, single crochet. So that's all that's new for this row. Just keep going the whole way across. So coming to the end of row 13, we will single crochet in the chain 2 space at the end of that row. All right, and then we're just going to chain 2 and start again with row 2. So that is the repeat. So I put my stitch marker here to show that this is where I started row 2 before. And so each time I start a row 2, I'm going to put a stitch marker in the end of that row. So that way I'll keep track of how many repeats I'm doing. So repeat rows 2 through 13 to build up your rectangle. Okay, and just to show you where this is going, so here we have the first, here's the first set, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So you'll repeat 5 times those 13 rows. Okay, so once you have made your front piece, you're also going to do the same thing to make your back, and your back is exactly the same as the front, only you're going to repeat those rows 2 through 13 6 times instead of 5 times. So your back will end up being slightly longer than the front. And now I'll show you how to seam it together. Okay, so I have my front and my back layered. So here's my back, and here's the top right corner, and here's the front, the top right corner. If you're left-handed, you would just be over on the left side here. And I have measured 5 inches from the corner in. And I'm going to use my clips here to mark that and to hold these together to straighten.